sana bitana bitawilaya umbari bihamla bitao fi fanandi ama fi lojat fi bahrat al-filhai كان في مشاكلات كتير في بيانو الحاجات دي دكال بالطريقه بتاعت الحكومه وكما كان الحاجات دي يجي يكوش في جنوب السودان المشكله العمل نفسه بيانو كيف القرار طلع له يومين ولا 3 يوم الحمله قام وقاعدين يصدروا حاجات بتاع التجار بيخلي الوضع الاقتصاديه في البلد بيكون بطال المفروض يدي موله بتاع شهر اما شهرين 3 شهور الجماعه ده الموضوع بتاع المريسه حاجات بتعملوا بيجابوا ده يشيلوا برا.
Sounds of the Week on radio, your eye on South Sudan. Live from Juba, on air and online.
This is iRadio News.
Hello, good afternoon. This is iRadio News. First, here are the headlines. The African Union's Peace and Security Council in its recent meeting expressed deep concern over the deteriorating political and security situation in South Sudan and called for the immediate and unconditional release of first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar. The Minister of Information in Warab State says one person was killed and another injured after gunmen ambushed travelers in Tony South County on Wednesday. An agenda specialist is urging families, communities, and stakeholders in South Sudan to show compassion, not condemnation, towards survivors of sexual violence in conflict in a bid to end stigma, shame, and blame. These stories and more coming to you in this news bulletin with me, Baria Johnson, and now the news in detail. The African Union Peace and Security Council in its meeting expressed deep concern over the deteriorating political and security situation in South Sudan and called for the immediate and unconditional release of first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar. In a statement adopted on June 12, 2025 and shared with iRadio yesterday, the African Union Peace and Security Council issued a stark warning of a potential civil war in South Sudan. The Council's updated briefing on South Sudan comes with urgent calls for an immediate end to hostilities among various armed groups and a strong condemnation of violence against civilians. It described as blatant violations of their access, including the continued house arrest of first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and the dismissals and detention of other SPLMIO officials from the unity government. The statement partially reads, and I quote, "The Council expresses deep concern over the continued house arrest of Dr. Riek Machar and calls for his immediate and unconditional release." The adopted statement reads, "It further calls for the immediate and unconditional release and reinstatement of other detained SPLMIO officials to de-escalate the prevailing political tension and to prevent the total collapse of the RXS." End quote. The Council also demanded an independent investigation into all violations of the peace agreement. The AU reaffirmed its commitment to supporting the full implementation of the RXS as a guarantor, stating its respect for South Sudan's sovereignty and solidarity with its people's aspirations for durable peace, security, and development. It acknowledged the contributions of various partners, including IGAD, UNMISS, RGMEC, the Troika, and the AUC5. The Minister of Information in Warab State says one person was killed and another injured after gunmen ambushed travelers in Tony South County on Wednesday. Speaking to iRadio this morning from Kwajok Town, Minister Mamer Bath Marol confirmed the incident and said local authorities have launched an investigation. He said the assailants targeted a hardtop Land Cruiser traveling from Juba when it was attacked. The identities of the attackers remains unknown. However, Minister Bath assured the public that security forces have been deployed to pursue the perpetrators and maintain peace in the area.
It was confirmed one dead and one wounded. Yesterday I talked to County Commissioner of Control. Confirmed. It was they had problem coming from Juba. When they reached that area, called a Mesto, the gunman attacked the car, killed one person innocent, instantly and wounded one. Now, according to what I heard from County Commissioner, if the incident happened yesterday, forces were moved to that area. Yes. Now that area now is secure, is fully secured by the armed forces.
This incident adds to the growing concerns about the road insecurity in Warab State, where violence continues to threaten civilian safety, especially along major routes and in bordering regions. A gender specialist is urging families, communities, and stakeholders in South Sudan to show compassion, not condemnation, towards survivors of sexual violence in conflict in a bid to end shame, stigma, and blame. Salome Kwaje-Taban, a sexual violence specialist with the International Committee of the Red Cross in South Sudan, called for an end to stigma against survivors of sexual violence in conflict in the country. She said survivors need support and protection to help them overcome the incident. According to Salome, without support, survivors or victims will have serious long-term consequences which will discourage them from seeking support. She spoke on iRadio's Dawn Show this morning.
If we can change our attitude towards survivors, from blaming, from making survivors feel guilty, to an attitude that accepts, to an attitude that is very supportive to the survivors, I think survivors or victims will not have serious long-term consequences, and they will be able to seek support that they need badly. As we all know that sexual violence can lead to very grave consequences for the survivor and even for their families. So if we can change our attitude from blaming, from making victims feel guilty, from shaming, from gossiping, to very supportive attitude where we accept survivors and we try to let them know that it's not their fault, we don't isolate them, I think it will help really a lot for them to be able to seek support that they need badly.
Today marks the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. Observed on 19th June, the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict is meant to raise awareness on the urgent need to prevent and combat the heinous incidents of sexual violence in conflict zones. South Sudan has experienced immense sexual gender-based violence against women and girls since the outbreak of the conflict in 2013. Over a decade of conflict and intercommunal violence, it has led to the normalization of sexual violence among the weapon bearers as well as civilians. It has also reinforced pre-existing and harmful social norms that led to victim blaming. Stigma, including rejection by family, divorce, and isolation from the community, are key reasons most victims and survivors fear seeking help. That in turn causes delays in accessing necessary care and worsens many long-term consequences for victims or survivors and their families. You are listening to iRadio Afternoon News. Former Vice President Dr. James Wani-Iga has urged the newly appointed governor of Central Equatoria State to work closely with security forces and relevant government authorities to tackle the pressing issues of land grabbing and conflicts between cattle keepers and farmers in the state. Dr. Iga made the remarks upon the reception ceremony of the new governor of Central Equatoria State, General Rabi Mojung Emmanuel, in Juba on Wednesday. He urged a collaborative effort to ensure stability, protect livelihoods, and promote economic growth in the region. Iga cautioned Governor Rabi against tribalism and nepotism within the government system. He underscored the importance of equitable representation of all tribes in the state's leadership to foster unity, stability, and effective governance.
Comrade General Rabi Majong, yakwi junubda au besifa khas istuwaia al-usra indu tahadiyat. Inta tarafa den inta mabede. Evident. There are challenges. Wana maksud asan ba'ad min tahadiyat da already Comrade Jadalla wonus annu ما فوقه كلام بتاع لين جرافين ما فوقه كلام بتاع أفغان اللي قد دمر أكل بتاع مواطن بتاع إسرائيل الأسرة وأساسا في إسرائيل كله. على السؤال طبعا ده بيعملوا كيف؟ أنت يا أخوي أنت بربط يدك مع الرئيس بتاعنا وأكثر من كده مع جنرالز بتاع وحدات المنظمة بتاع الجيش بتاع بوليس ناشونال سيكيورتي والآخرين. ده مهم.
For his part, Deputy Governor of Central Equatoria State, Paulino Lokudu Obede, emphasized the importance of collective efforts within the state government to effectively deliver services to the people. Lokudu cautioned against division among the different communities in the state. He added that the state needs leadership with a national character. Obede urged the intellectuals in the state to invest in development rather than division.
Central Equatoria issues that were said here and many others are there. These issues require a collective work, one unity government. We work together as sons and the daughters of this state so that we will prosper. A common man or a woman down outside there, they don't care which party you come from. Anena jina عشان نولي خدمات للشعب ما جينا من قبائل ولا جينا من أطراف السياسية الأخرى ما يكون في تفريز إنه ده لونه زهري وداك أخضر وداك بمبي وداك أبيض وأسود ولا أحمر. ألوان ده لتجميل أيديولوجية سياسية معينة. حتى إنسان في محل الناس قاعدين فوق ده في أكثر من ناس لابسين قميص براو بنطلون براو ولا سكيرت براو وفي ألوان براو. ده لتجميل لكن ما لتفريز السياسي ما لعدم الوحدة.
And finally, Western Equatorial State authorities have agreed to harmonize the tax system, eliminate overlapping mandates, and clearly define revenue collection roles, particularly at border points, in a bid to strengthen public financial management and improve revenue transparency. The agreement was reached during a 3-day inclusive dialogue on tax harmonization held in Yambio early this week. The forum, organized in partnership with the United Nations Development Programme UNDP, brought together state officials, lawmakers, civil society representatives, and economic experts to explore challenges and opportunities within the state tax system. Speaking at the closing session, Honorable Baria Tito Morris, State Minister of Finance, Planning and Investment, said the dialogue provided critical insight and actionable resolutions for mobilizing and managing taxes within a legal and accountable framework. Clement Gonji Liba, chairperson of the Committee on Economy, Finance and Investment in the State Assembly, revealed that the state has faced 3 years of uncoordinated tax practices. He said, and I quote, "We have agreed to harmonize the tax system, address overlapping mandates, and clearly define collection roles, especially at borders where confusion has created inefficiencies." Civil society groups have welcomed the state government's acknowledgement of past irregularities in revenue management. Wanga Emmanuel, a civil society activist in Yambio, praised the inclusive approach of the dialogue, saying, and I quote, "We are encouraged by the government's willingness to involve civil society and improve transparency. Resources must be used for public benefit, and we urge the state to support small businesses and promote accountability." End quote. James Richard Ramadan, Commissioner of the State Revenue Authority, noted that the discussions helped clarify institutional responsibilities between the state and county levels. Otto James, UNDP Economic Governance Analyst, reaffirmed the organization's commitment to supporting transparent and accountable governance in Western Equatoria State. The dialogue concluded with participants calling for continued collaboration among government institutions, development partners, and the private sector to ensure long-term sustainable reforms in revenue collection and financial governance. And now, listen of iRadio, we go to the regional and international news with my colleague James Atem.
Thank you. Representatives of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo have reached a draft agreement that could end decades of conflict. The breakthrough, mediated by the US and Qatar, provides for the disengagement, disarmament, and conditional integration of armed groups fighting in eastern DR Congo. It includes provisions for a joint security mechanism to prevent future flare-ups. The peace deal is expected to be formally signed next week. Elsewhere, a controversial South African politician central to a row over race relations in the country has been denied entry to the UK. The Home Office said Julius Malema had been deemed non-conducive to the public good and that it was undesirable to grant him entry. In a letter published by local media outlet News 24, the UK government cited his vocal support for Hamas, including a speech he made after the October 27 attacks in which he said his own party would arm the group if it came into power. Finally, a hospital in Beersheba in northern Israel has been hit after Iran launched a wave of missiles overnight. Soroka Hospital has been extensively damaged, a spokesperson says, while Israel's emergency service says at least 65 people have been injured across the country. Iranian state media reports that the missile strike targeted a military site next to the hospital and not the facility. And that's the end of international news with me, James Atem, and now back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Atem, and now to the sports news with Lasuba Memo.
Thanks, Baria Johnson. In the world of sports, let's begin at home. Delegates from 16 local football associations across South Sudan have begun arriving in Juba ahead of the 9th Ordinary General Assembly of the South Sudan Football Association scheduled for tomorrow. A total of 37 delegates representing the local football associations from the 10 states plus ABA administrative area have already commenced zonal and regional consultative meetings in preparation for the main assembly. The General Assembly is expected to address key issues that are critical to the future of football in the country. Top on the agenda will be the review and adoption of the activity and financial reports, as well as the amendment of core legal documents including the SSFA statutes, general regulations and electoral code. These legal amendments are seen as essential steps ahead of the upcoming SSFA elections in July 2025. In major world competitions, fans have been warned by the Premier League that fixtures could be moved at relatively short notice next season because of the number of teams playing in Europe. A record 9 top-flight clubs have qualified for UEFA competitions in the 2025-2026 campaign. The Premier League said there is an increased likelihood that games will be rescheduled if English teams reach the latter stages, and it suggested fans take this into consideration when planning their attendance at games. Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea, Newcastle and Tottenham will be playing in the Champions League next season. Aston Villa and Crystal Palace have qualified for the Europa League, while Nottingham Forest will be playing in the Conference League. The warning comes after the Premier League announced the fixture list for the 2025-2026 season on Wednesday. Champions Liverpool will host Bournemouth in the Friday night curtain raiser, while Manchester United will play Arsenal in the opening weekend's standout fixture at Old Trafford. In tennis, British number 1 Jack Draper joked that his body used to break down easily despite looking a bit like a Ferrari, but believes the decision to tune up means he is now more capable of going the distance in matches. The 23-year-old came out on top of a grueling encounter with Australian Alexei Popyrin at Queen's on Wednesday, recovering from going a set down to win 3-6, 6-2, 7-6, 7-5 and progress to the quarterfinals. Draper is ranked 6th in the world and seen as the great British hope in the men's tennis as Wimbledon approaches. That's all in the world of sports. Back to you, Baria Johnson.
Thank you, Lasuba Memo. This is iRadio News, and to end this bulletin, here are the headlines once again. The African Union's Peace and Security Council in its recent meeting expressed deep concern over the deteriorating political and security situation in South Sudan and called for the immediate and unconditional release of first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar. The Minister of Information in Warrap State says one person was killed and another injured after gunmen ambushed travelers in Tonj South County on Wednesday. And a gender specialist is urging families, communities, and stakeholders in South Sudan to show compassion, not condemnation, towards survivors of sexual violence in conflict in a bid to end stigma, shame, and blame. That's the end of iRadio News. If there is a story or an event you would like iRadio to cover or report about, please send us a text message on +211 925 287870. It's also our WhatsApp number. Follow us on X at iRadio Juba, like our Facebook page, iRadio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at iRadio South Sudan. You can also visit our website and listen to us online at www.iradio.org. Stay tuned for the news in Arabic at 1:30. I am Baria Johnson. Thanks for listening.
Sounds of the Week on iRadio.